Yesterday I watched it on YouTube. Now I know it's a fact.
G'day, I'm the anti-theocrat and anti-cultist, and I'm here to make your day. Now, I'm not just here to make this video. It's a hot summer day. I've got the air conditioning on. There's wind blowing up outside. I've got family around because of school holidays and a long weekend. Bonus. And that's my goose if you hear him. You getting that? I hope you're getting that. He's a noisy bugger, but he's okay. Biggest problem is, best guard dog ever. But the person he bites the most is me. Okay, let's go on with our story. We're working out of this. White Ribbon Australia closes its door. Hip hip hooray. Seriously, I'm really happy about this. This is a male feminist organisation. During its time, it was best known for its exorbitant executive wages and its travel expenses. What has it done in its time? Well, lots of self-promotion. It self-promotes itself with White Ribbon Australia Day, which, as we can see, stand up and speak out, prevent men's violence against women. Their primary goal is to highlight women as victims and men as perpetrators. They will shout you down if you mention the idea that it could be reversed. Totally the male feminist gig. A TV presenter who was associated with them a little while ago was actually videoed womanizing, getting drunk and rolling around with some young women in the street. So, you know, these are just guys like the rest of us, but they're preaching a higher standard for the rest of us. And I've got no time for that shit. You can fuck off. Until you address violence from mothers, you will never address violence in children as they grow up. And so you will always have more violent men and more violent women as a result of the violence of women. And there's a reason why I bring this up, because the statistics this year show that mothers have quite staggeringly outnumbered fathers as the killers of children. They're doing good this year. It's better than previous years where they've generally outnumbered the men doing the same thing. So if we really want to prevent domestic violence, we need to stop women being associated with children. I think that's the message we need to take. I think these extreme messages are not overly unwarranted, given the extreme messages the feminists are willing to undertake. Myself, I'm probably more of a moderate. You know, I think we should just address violence in the home, or violence anywhere, really. I've been reading a lot about violence, and it turns out, hey, men get violated more often than women. We're not allowed to address that issue, are we? It always comes back to domestic violence, because in a domestic situation, it's the women who seem to top out. And that could just be the reporting, because I know I've been assaulted in a domestic situation, physically and sexually. And I never came out and told anybody until the feminists made an issue of the sort of thing that I got. Because I never thought of it as assault until they made an issue of it. Anyway, more than happy to see White Ribbon Australia closing its doors. To add to this, we get this random number generator thrown in by the ABC. Thank you. That's the expected average of who the police would have dealt with in a normal year. But totally just a random number generator, really, just a counter. This one over here, I'm going to track around this page a little bit, because I find so much of the way this is sold to us by our public broadcaster, the one that our taxpayer dollars pay for, very interesting. Because added to this is raped, tracked, humiliated. Clergy wives speak about domestic violence. Do you know nobody has ever really discussed which gender was the one most assaulted by priests sexually in all the trials that we heard of? I mean, we all saw the men on TV. Yes, it was young boys being assaulted. If you think I'm going to worry about clergy wives who put themselves in that situation, rather than the boys who are supposed to be in the care of a respected older person, you can go and fuck yourself. If you think you can just overwrite the importance of the priests' crimes towards young boys and make it about their wives, no, fuck you. Then there's a story under that. These women all died in 2015. They were not just statistics. Yes, but how many were killed by women? And how many were not killed in domestic violence situations? I know that the way the feminists count these things, I think Red Ribbon they call themselves, a Red Heart campaign. The Red Heart campaign, they counted, last year they counted a woman who died overseas as a domestic violence statistic in Australia. She was Australian. She died as a tourist at the hands of some locals in some far distant place. She was added to their statistics. So there's no honesty in the way that feminists tend to deal with these things. If you're looking for oh look, we've ticked up an extra one. If you want an honest assessment of what's going on in domestic violence, I recommend Facebook, Domestic Violence Australia. I think I should have found them and dug them up to point you in their direction, because they're keeping account not only of the victims but who the perpetrators are, and they're counting them for men, women and children. And this is a statistic that's never given to us, mainly the perpetrator statistic. Nobody seems to care what the perpetrator statistic is, because the perpetrators are not always men, and the message from the feminists is they are always men, as per the Duluth model. If you don't know the Duluth model, look it up. I'll probably cover it in a later video because it's one of my pet peeves. As with the tender years doctrine, as a at-home father, that one shits me up the wall. Anyway, I'm moving from this because good-o, White Ribbon Australia are closing. Fuck them. But let's move to this bullshit story. I'm sorry to break in the middle here, but I thought I should add this to our material. This was the project covering White Ribbon Australia's closing. This is only the end of it. There was a whole lot of feminist rhetoric and crap at the start, and I'm not going to go over all of that again. I thought I'd show you the end, because they've edited the end of the show. They've removed something that's quite damning, really.
As we lose institutions trying to make things better, we're yet to hear how our politicians...
They're referring to White Ribbon by institutions doing things better. White Ribbon's never done anything.
Quick quiz. Can you even name the current Minister for Women? In this terrifying moment, I bet you probably can't.
I can't, and I don't care. Can you name the Minister for Men? Can you explain why you can't name him? Because there isn't one.
Those numbers are worse than they've ever been. And can I ask you, do you know who the Minister for Women is? No, I don't. Joel? No, I do not. Wally?
Yeah, I do.
You do know?
I do, yeah.
Maurice Payne?
Yeah, but I had to think about it for a long time.
Yeah.
Keep your eye on Waleed.
I think she's got another portfolio as well, but yeah.
She's got a huge portfolio, Foreign Affairs.
And she's not front and centre as Minister for Women, which is the point that...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll give you some stats. This is a 2017 survey, National Community Attitudes Towards Violence Against Women. 1 in 3 Australians still believe the woman is responsible for continued violence in a relationship if she doesn't leave her abusive partner. 1 in 5...
There's a better than a fair chance she's also a perpetrator then.
And 1 in 10 think it's acceptable for police to give lower priority to domestic violence cases they've attended many times before.
If they've been attending false claims, which are made often, and they don't follow them up, then sure, why not?
Fix this problem. Because the women who are suffering must feel so alone and so unsupported.
The men must feel really unsupported. There are no services for the men.
Sorry, they're doing nothing wrong. They fell in love with the wrong person.
So did the men.
Which is to say nothing of the shortfall in emergency services, just even the practical...
There's no shortfall in emergency services for women. There are no emergency services for men.
organisation has gone into liquidation just would be the most horrifying thing to hear if you're in a horrible situation.
I think if women are in horrible situations, they should cheer White Ribbon closing, because $6.5 million have been totally wasted doing nothing. Now, this is what the project is currently publishing. I'm going to stop this because it's shit. That was the project's current issuing of the show, but I'm going to show you what they really had go to air. Let's see if we can dig this up. It'll be on this, so I have to shrivel his nuts. Oh, it's probably shriveled enough anyway. Male feminist, gay male feminist, shriveled nuts. Okay, this is what they actually put to air.
Even just practical stuff. There's a lot of money going out, but as you say, we're not seeing
Must be going to the wrong places.
To hear that the White Ribbon organisation has gone into liquidation just would be the most horrifying thing to hear if you're in a horrible situation.
Yeah. I'm staggered that no one mentioned the slap. Can we please watch this? This is fabulous.
This is fabulous. This is fabulous.
Now, Jackie, did you just bound into work that day?
Mate, I tell you what, like, yes!
Like, yes. This is fabulous. That's how we treat men and domestic violence. But we have to cry that a male feminist organisation that did absolutely nothing for women is closing its doors. And we're giving a whole heap of feminist rhetoric about how women are so abused to make this point. It's also fucking irrelevant when you look at the fact that there is absolutely nothing for men. There are no services. It is hard to report to the police. There is no minister for men. You can all go and get fucked. Right, I'm over with that one. I'm going to take us back to where I was. Australia is turning a blind eye to violence against Indigenous women. But we will not stay silent. Our lives matter. There is no group of people in Australia that has less services than Aboriginal women. Even in the cities where Aboriginal women are probably the minority, where you might expect white women or immigrant women to be the larger numbers, because the Aboriginals really are a small part of our population. Even there, services are dedicated to Aboriginals. Out here in the bush, they're essentially the top-ranked group of people as far as services go. Nobody is ignoring them. What they're ignoring is that Aboriginal women can be violent. And it's men also being abused. And the only services for the men appear to be behaviour changing. Now, behaviour changing is the feminist idea that if you feminise men, if you get rid of their toxic masculinity, you can make them better men and they'll stop abusing women. Now, in order to undertake one of these things, you have to admit that you were a violator, even if you're the victim. And there are male victims being sent by courts in Australia to undertake these courses where they have to first sign that they were the cause of the violence against them. And you got this shit going on. I'm not interested in your little moan about turning a blind eye to the violence against Indigenous women. It's about the only bloody thing I ever hear of. Is violence against women, violence against Indigenous women, top and foremost. So the example here is a woman who killed her husband or partner. Now, she went to prison apparently, and that's apparently a terrible thing, that she went to prison for killing someone. Apparently they found out she was abused. But we have absolutely no context here. Was she a partner in the abuse? Was she an instigator in the abuse? We know nothing. All we know is there was abuse in the home. She shows marks from what we're meant to assume is just abuse. And I've got to warn you, I live in a heavy Aboriginal population area, and I have for quite a number of years of my life. Next door to me is a dump site. Basically, that backyard could be our local rubbish refuge. It's just crap. If I'd be worried about disease and rodents coming out of it if it wasn't for the fact we've got cats keeping them at bay. But Aboriginal woman, 7 kids I think it is. They've all been taken from her custody. She's known for drugs. She's not often here. But her kids have also all been placed in the custody of her mother, who's raising them. Now, she doesn't have a man there. Her mother was there for a while. Her mother was in the same house, and her mother was doing most of the care work. But who's she got to blame? She can't blame a man for the situation she's in. But I've lived in communities where I've watched Aboriginal men get battered, because alcohol and boredom are big problems with the Aboriginal community, probably the only real issues that need to be dealt with. And Aboriginal men get bored, they get drunk to the point where they are easier to abuse. And you watch women and children, their kids, abuse them. And it drives them back to the drink, where they get abused again. Because they are pliable men, they're broken men. Now you do get a considerable number of men who are violent or fight back. But it's not all one way, and in the Aboriginal community, massively so. The last fight in the street out here, I live in a public housing area, it's all around me. Aboriginal women running up and down the street screaming at men or at each other. I never hear the Aboriginal men screaming at their women. It just doesn't happen here. I'm certain it happens elsewhere, but I never hear it here. The only people screaming are Aboriginal women. So when you put this shit on me and you tell me a woman killed a man and went to prison for it, I think, well, she had 2 options, didn't she? Leave or kill. Because the services that were meant to be helping him out, and he probably would have been picked up a few times by the police, but the services that were meant to be helping him out, all feminist-run services, because there are no male services, either that or he just went to prison where it got worse. But they failed him. They failed him because we live in a world of feminist rhetoric, where men are always the perpetrator, women are always the innocents. There's no question that women who are violent in the house pass that on to their children, and it becomes generational, which means both the boys and the girls in the household are coming out as the next violent generation. None of this is discussed. We're just meant to accept that Aboriginal women are ignored. And I'm telling you now, without reservation, there is no bloody way Aboriginal women are being ignored. They have more access to service than most of us. Anyway, I'm going to move on to this last story, just add to this, because I just think I don't have anywhere else to put it, and it's such a pile of shit that it's got to go somewhere. I've got to do something with it. It is from an Australian source, but it's in the US. Mum sends teen sons to school with tampons to help female peers in emergencies. Where do you go with this? She's trying to break down a period taboo, apparently. And the only thing I think she's trying to do is break her sons. But because I knew about my mother's periods. I knew when she was having them. I knew what they were. My mother was a serious migraine sufferer at that time. And every time that came around, we were expected to cook. The men in the family did the cooking and helped out. So you can be made aware of these things without it having to be obnoxious and weirdly creepy towards your schoolmates. I didn't walk around, I mean, I had a girlfriend whose pill I carried, and it was my job in our relationship to make sure she took the pill every day. So I carried around her pill. I got no problem with these things. I think these are responsible things to do. I think if you want to be responsible for certain things in your relationship, there's no issue with it. And if you want to know your kids to know certain things, there's no problem with it. It's not really that hard. But when you send your sons to school with tampons, what are you saying? Here's a thing to insert in your vagina. Please tell me when you're bleeding. I would like to know more about your bodily functions, which you probably don't want to tell me about. Please make me aware of when you are having your period, and if you really need, I'll help put it in. I don't know how far this is meant to go. I don't know what this mother's really expecting. Is she expecting her sons to help insert? The other thing is she's not sending pads. Pads are very common. Most of the women in my life have preferred pads over tampons. So she's chosen not to send pads, but to send tampons. She's not sending them to the school for a principal or school nurse to keep hold of. No, she's sending them with her sons. She's possibly creating the creepiest two kids on the planet. These kids are going to walk around thinking that other people's private health concerns are theirs all the time. And they're going to demand every woman in their life for the next, 40, 50 years tells them when they're having their period. Please tell me when you're having your period. I'll insert this for you. I just don't know where this goes. It is the stupidity of today that people can send their sons to school with tampons thinking that women are responsible, the girls at the school are going to enjoy letting her sons know what's going on with their body. And this is meant to teach the sons something. I don't get it. I just don't get it. It is so fucking creepy. It's unbelievable. Here you go. Sorry, boys. Going to be the creepiest fellas on the bloody planet. I don't like this putting up children on the screen. I don't know why do people put their children in these situations where I'm putting bloody kids' faces on the screen instead of this hag here? Anyway, I just wanted to cover that because this is where we're going. We have to apparently now send our sons to school with tampons so that they can concern themselves with the bodily autonomy of their female schoolmates. And that's not going to be creepy, set them up for a Me Too accusation, or just make them out as the weird kids. Like I say, I'm not sure where this ends. Is she saying to her boys, please offer the service of inserting? I don't know. It all sounds way too much for me and way overboard. I just don't know. Look, I'm the father of two sons. I couldn't do that shit. It's just fucking ridiculous. Alright. That's it for me. I'm going to pull out at this stage. This was a bit of a ramble, but I was really happy that White Ribbon were closing. I thought I'd better cover that. And while I was there, I found a couple of other stories that I needed to tack somewhere. So, sucks to be you that you got stuck with them. I'm the Anti-Theocrat. May your gods remain fictional, and I'll see you in the next one.